welcome back to another episode of our YouTube channel. Today we're going to talk about investments, which if you remember our strategies, it's basically you're letting someone else handle the offense, someone else can handle the defense. You just want to buy the team and get the proceeds of that. We're going to cover a couple of books today. We'll talk about the eighth wonder of the world, and then we'll cover both retirement and non-retirement accounts. I want to start by recommending a couple of books. The first one is Financial Freedom, and the next one is The Automatic Millionaire. Both of these are great for investments. They'll give you some advice to follow. And then once again, just a reminder to read a couple articles a week. This will really start to compound with time, and as I said before, within a year, you'll be over 100 articles, and you'll really start to know what you're talking about. Let's talk about the eighth wonder of the world. This is known as compound returns. Before I show you the calculator to demonstrate it, just remember this is for demonstration only. Don't get too wrapped up in the numbers. Everybody's situation is different. You need to tailor it to yourself. But I just set this up to show you what's going on. Okay, so I have it set up here to where you have 7% at 35 years with a $6,000 contribution. If you do that, you'll have $829,000 at the end of the day. And how that works here, I have it set up as conservative as possible. So this is assuming that you contribute the very last day of the year. And you contribute your $6,000, so you can now return the first year. All you have is $6,000. You start with $6,000 the next year. You contribute another $6,000 the last day of the year. But you also get $420 return on the initial $6,000. Where the compound returns come in is if you look, it doesn't then go up to 840, it goes up to 869. And what's going on here is that you're getting returns on your returns. And you can see it really starts to take off as the balance gets bigger. I have this set out to 35 years. And you can see that toward the end, you're getting over $40,000 a year in returns. Now, I chose 7% because it's a fairly conservative rate. I doubt even in 35 years you will ever get exactly 7% return. Most likely it's going to be 21 year, maybe 3% the next year, -7 the year after that. It's going to go everywhere, but it'll end up averaging out and be as though you got 7% a year. So a $6,000 contribution because that is the IRA limit right now. It will change in the future. It will go up, but we kept it there to be conservative. Okay, another part to show this even more so is to show it to where you can make a one-time contribution. You wait enough time and it ends up being a lot. This is something that I recommend for people who have children later in their career when they can afford it. Obviously never delay having children just so that you can do this, but if you are able to do it, it's a great tool. And so I wanted to show you that. You got an 8% return over 65 years, contribute absolutely nothing except for your initial contribution, which is $6,700. $1 million at the end of the day. Of course, the naysayers, they're going to tell you $1 million isn't going to be worth that much in 65 years. And I always shoot back and say, you know what? It's going to be worth a lot more than $6,700 and certainly more than zero. It's a great way to help your children get started in retirement, and it doesn't cost you a lot of money. And it's also a great teacher to show them the power of compound returns because they can see it firsthand. You can show them their account, once they're a little bit older to understand, and they can say, wow, so you only started with $6,700, now it's worth $18,000. That's huge. And so definitely recommend that if you're later in your career and everything. Okay, so I wanted to start with retirement accounts. The first thing that you always want to do, start with a goal. You got to look at the end in mind and then work your way backwards. Create a plan to get there. You go back to the calculator here. We're going to assume that your goal is $2 million. You have 35 years because you started when you're 25. You want to retire when you're 60. We'll assume the same 7% return. That means that you would have to do $14,468 contribution every year to get there. Of course, most likely you would do that every paycheck, and so that changes things. But just for the sake of easy illustration, we'll assume you had the whole 14.5 to just throw at the end of the year, and that's how you get to the $2 million. The reason that I chose $2 million is because most bond funds these days, even in the low interest rate environment, pay somewhere around 4%. Hopefully that goes higher in the future, but you figure if you wanted to have about $80,000 a year when you're retired, of course your house is paid off, you don't have all the expenses you do while you're working, $80,000 is a pretty good sum. you would need $2 million to do that. And so that's why I set that up there. Of course, this is all just for demonstration. Your situation will be different. Okay, so definitely start with a plan and get there. And then the next thing to do is to talk to your human resources department and see what kind of retirement program you have. They're all different. I don't want to go into depths of them today. They're all named after different IRS codes. That's how they get their names. Just see what your company offers and take advantage of it. Most of them will have a contribution limit next year of $19,500, and most of them will not allow you to withdraw without penalty before you're 59 and a half. So that's general guidelines, but again, they're all different. Just see what your company has. The third one is another powerful tool, and that is to make sure that you contribute at least enough to get your employer's match. This is very important. You don't want to leave money on the table, but it's also a guaranteed way to get returns. So say that they match up to 6%, they'll match half of your contribution. So that's just a great return right off the bat. You don't have to worry about it. It comes in every year, especially once you're fully vested. Definitely do that. And then also do enough to reach your goal. If you remember back here, if you wanted $2 million, you're 25 now, you want to retire when you're 60, you have to contribute that much. And so keep that in mind when you're setting up your contributions to make sure that you get to that point. Another important thing is to keep contributing. You go back to the calculator. What makes this first one add up is your $6,000 every year. And there are going to be temptations. You're going to want to do a down payment for a house. You're going to want to buy whatever. Stick to the plan. It will reward you in the end. Something I forgot to mention earlier, with this initial plan up here, the $6,000, you contribute $210,000. Yes, that's a lot of money, but in 35 years, you get pretty much threefold back. And so you have to ask yourself, is it really worth? And then, go from there. So the 829 is obviously worth more than the 210. And so just keep that in mind when you have to make those decisions. Okay, and the last one, just don't worry about market swings. If anything, it's a good thing when the market goes down, at least for your retirement accounts, because now you're buying more shares at a lower price. Don't sell. Just buy them at the lower price. Just keep contributing every pay period, and it will reward you in the end. Okay, so now non-retirement accounts. It's pretty much the same principles, except you have a shorter time frame. Again, start with the goal. Make sure you contribute enough to meet your goal. The big thing is do not sell before you are ready. A lot of people are tempted when the market starts to go down. They want to get out before it completely crashes. If anything, that's when you need to be buying more shares because they're cheaper. And then when it goes back up, then you'll be rewarded for that. Perfect example, 2020, the market went down at the beginning of COVID-19. Well, now it's back up at all-time highs. It was the same year that people had sold, and I'm sure many did. They're regretting it now. If anything, they should have been buying. So keep that in mind. The next one is to keep the principal invested. An example of this is, say you contribute $10,000. You buy a mutual fund for $10,000, and then after a couple of years, it's worth $14,000. If you decide to cash out at that point, either cash out just the $4,000 that it increased, or sell the whole thing and then invest the $10,000 into another type of investment if you think yours is kind of topped out. This is really big, especially for the fifth one, because something that we do in our family is we spend the excess on luxury. So say we invest 10, we sell for 14, we use the 4 to take a trip or to buy something nice for the house or something like that. It's a lot easier to justify those things because you did it with investment returns rather than your own labor, and that's how we do it. But then we also turn around and invest the money back into the market, so that way it becomes a money tree and it just keeps paying us over time. And of course there's bad years, it doesn't happen every year, but for the most part, especially over the last decade, that has been the case, to where if you just keep reinvesting it, the principal's always there, and then everybody's happy. I wanted to briefly touch on investment choices. I personally like index funds. I'm really lazy. Basically what they do is they just track the market and you just set it and forget it. You don't have to worry about it. That's the way that I go. There are different types of index. You have the S&P 500, you have small caps, there's different types. I personally, for my retirement accounts, look at both S&P 500 and small caps because I believe over 35 years that small caps do return more, and I want to take advantage of that. A couple of good companies to recommend are Vanguard and Fidelity. Both of them have really low fees, and they just track the index. And so, like I said, you just set it and forget it, and then let yourself be rewarded in the end. The good thing about index funds is they are diversified already. However, there are different ways to diversify even more. So you can have your S&P 500 and then also a bond fund, or you can do the S&P 500 and a small cap like I just talked about. You can do foreign and domestic. There's a lot of different ways to do it, but it's important to diversify. You don't want to have it all in one stock, even if you're confident that that company is going to do well. If you are able to see the future, though, definitely give me a call because I want to know what investments to buy. Unless you're able to do that, let me think of some good names. Nostradamus, I guess, is one of them. I don't know if you actually can see the future, but anyways, just throwing that out there. If you are able to do it, let me know. Otherwise, just try to diversify. If you remember back to the Johnny Appleseed that we used in the introduction, where he eats the apple, plants the seed, that's what you're doing by buying the shares. The reason that I chose apples is because you have to have two different apple trees in order for it to work. You can't just plant one in your yard. It's not going to produce fruit. You need to have two. And it's that way with investments. You want to have diversification to help with the market swings and everything like that. And then the last one is rebalancing. The professionals tell you to pick a time every year, whether it's December, whether it's June, whatever it is, and make sure that your allocations are consistent with what your goals are. So if one's performing really well, they recommend selling some of those shares to help out some of the lower ones, and that's rebalancing there. Tried to keep this really basic. I didn't want to go into too much detail because this is just designed to get you started, and reading these books and articles is where you're going to get the deeper knowledge that you need. I also didn't want this video to be an hour long. So this is the investment one. For the to-dos, definitely read your articles and get started. Basically, just go down this list. If you haven't already, talk to HR. Make sure you're contributing enough. Keep contributing, and time is on your side. Especially if you're young, if you're in your 20s, you have so much ahead of you. Let the investments grow. Let your money work hard for you, and you'll be rewarded tremendously for that. So, everybody have a good day, and we'll see you at the next episode.